Okay, live.
Thanks, team, for getting us through the technical difficulties and getting us online here on Wednesday. I'm going to start the day with Tucker looking at a new draft on H127 that addresses some concerns that the committee had. Ideally, we will vote on that bill today if possible. Might not be possible, and we're waiting on some committee members to do that anyway. And then hearing from a slew of witnesses on 158, and then doing miscellaneous tax this afternoon. And with that, Tucker, thanks for your patience. I hope you had a nice time at your computer in those 10 minutes, and would love for you to take us through this new draft.
For the record, Tucker Anderson, Legislative Counsel. You should have in front of you draft 2.2 of the committee's amendment to H127, which is on the screen now. The first two instances of amendment we covered the last time we met. These are technical corrections that were raised by Representative Taylor during the initial walkthrough. I have highlighted all of the new substance in the amendment, and I'll work my way through those instances of amendment and give you some context for them. The third instance of amendment, which is highlighted because it is new, this covers the issue the committee raised around joint bank accounts being used by wagerers and whether those joint bank accounts could be excluded. Initially, the committee had asked about whether the operators could detect when a joint bank account is being used. I did some research and reached out to some experts in the field who said that no, they would not be able to immediately recognize when a joint bank account is used. So this instance of amendment adds a duty for the Department of Liquor and Lottery to establish a process that allows a holder of a joint bank account to exclude that account from all operator platforms in the state. So this process would work out with the holder of a joint bank account contacting the department through whatever process they establish to say, please exclude this joint bank account from your platforms. And
Tucker, there's my understanding, and I really don't understand this issue all that well, is that a single account holder can exclude themselves, right? They can get on they can put themselves on a do not bet list. So this is just the other holder of that account putting on a do not bet list. Okay.
Yes. So this subdivision that's being amended is the self-exclusion process. That process is slightly different in that someone who's self-excluding actually gives identifying information to the department so that their name, social security number, driver's license number would trigger exclusion on the platform. This is a little more discreet in that it's not the person's identity, it's just the account. They would reach out and say, I don't want this account to be used on your platform.
Yeah.
Hey, Tucker. So you said you had some conversations. Did you say you had conversations with people in the industry?
Tucker, you just muted yourself, and Chris Delia is in the room with us, but you probably don't know that because you're inside the computer.
Yes, so it was the representatives from the banking industry, and Chris was one of those people. So if he's there, you might want to ask him about what his response was or is.
I guess what I'm just trying to get straight in my mind is that so this choke point or this throttle would be done at the bank level, not the sports betting industry level. Is that correct?
This would be done at the sports betting industry level, but it would be controlled by DLL. So DLL, as the enforcement officer, would receive the information and push that out to the operators that it has contracted with to say, this bank account number or however it's being identified should be excluded from your platform.
Is that done in any other state?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, so we'd be the first. Okay, thank you.
Carol?
Thank you. I'm wondering if the banking industry itself has any other, do they have any regulations around notifying people who are banking with them of their ability to protect themselves in joint accounts? I mean, I guess it's a question for
We can have
Chris.
Chris join us in the chair after we finish going through the draft.
Okay.
That works for you, Chris?
Yes.
Back to you, Tucker.
Thank you. All right, I'll move along to the fourth instance of amendment. This amends subsection G in section 1302. This is the section that deals with the list of department duties. And in the previous draft, subsection G required the department to include in its contract, and this is in subdivision 1, the provision that prohibits sports wagering brands, logos, and advertisements from being used on products sold in Vermont and intended for persons under 21 years of age. That's the existing language. The new material is in subdivisions 2 and 3. That contract would also have to include the requirement that the department and its operators cooperatively develop an advertising plan, which shall include strategies to limit unwanted advertising and advertising aimed at persons under 21. And third, a cap on the amount spent by the department and its operators on sports wagering advertising within the state.
Okay.
The fifth instance of amendment, there's going to be 3 instances of amendment that are related. 2 are going to come later as I move through, but they are all around how the problem gambling program is going to be funded and how money is going to move through the department into the state's funds. So this is the first, what I guess we'll call appropriations and spending correction. And this completely amends section 1304 to state that the revenues and fees that are received by the department will be deposited into the general fund. And conceptually, the way that the 3 amendments are going to work out is that all of the money is going to go into the general fund and then be appropriated to the department and the problem gambling program, respectively, by the General Assembly. The 6th instance of amendment describes some intent for the competitive bidding process. And this is going to be tacked on to the end of subsection A in that section to state that the intent of the General Assembly is that the department shall be guided by and prioritize the following when conducting the competitive bidding process, selecting its operators, and structuring the operator agreements. So 3 priorities here. First, maximizing revenues to the state. Second, reducing the illegal market and converting wagerers to the legal market. And finally, protecting Vermonters from problem gambling.
Tucker, would it be fair to say that the order in which you have presented 1, 2, and 3 suggests to an interpreter during rulemaking, for instance, that the first one is the most important, or am I reading too much into that?
No, there's no priority in how they're numbered, and they're all conjunctive, so all 3 have to be considered when structuring the competitive bidding process.
Thank you. Importante.
The 7th instance of amendment we covered last time. This is the restructured fees. Right. The 8th is the 20% minimum tax rate. We also covered that last time, which gets us to those 2 pieces that I teased earlier around the kind of appropriations and revenue side of this. The 9th instance of amendment completely amends section 1341. And in the underlying bill, that established a special fund for problem gambling that had dedicated percentage and then minimum threshold revenue dedication to that special fund. In lieu of the special fund, this has been simplified so that the Department of Mental Health will be tasked with managing a problem gambling program. And I highlighted all of this so that you were aware that the section is being replaced. But the only pieces that were amended here was the removal of the reference to the special fund and then changing the term fund to program when appropriate.
And this was on advice of JFO and request of approach.
That is correct. The mechanism before apparently did not make a lot of sense from an appropriation standpoint and from a, I guess, simplicity standpoint and efficiency. The previous formula was that the funds dedicated to the special fund would come out first, then the money would go to the general fund. And if there was any gap, then the general fund would have to reappropriate to make up the gap. And this just makes it so that everything goes to the general fund. And then the program is funded by the General Assembly on an annual basis, which is what the 10th instance of amendment does, which is in section 2A for the next 2 fiscal years, you have that minimum threshold funding is going to come out of the general fund. So subsection A, the following sums are appropriated to the Department of Mental Health for purposes of establishing and administering a problem gambling program. In FY24, 250,000, and in FY25, 500,000. Subsection.
Wait, sorry, Tucker. The way that I read this, then the Department of Mental Health doesn't necessarily get an ongoing appropriation for problem gambling. It's just for the setup. Okay.
Correct. This lasts until July 1st, 2025, I believe, 2024. Okay. Patrick will know when FY25 ends.
Okay.
All right, subsection B is conceptually new. And this states that for fiscal year 2024, 550,000 is appropriated from the general fund to DLL, and that the appropriation is made in anticipation of receipts from sports wagering operator fees. So this is startup funding so that DLL has the $550,000 it anticipates will cost for implementing and regulating the market for FY24 in anticipation of the payment of operator fees when the market actually gets stood up. And this is similar, but not the same as what was structured for cannabis as a startup fund. And that's all I have for you in the amendment.
This is going to appropriations after us, right?
I think whether we want it to or not. That's where I'll go. Questions, thoughts?
It's good to me.
Yeah.
Thanks. I had pressed one of our colleagues from JFO to explore the connection between the minimum number of operators and the likely projected revenues to the state. I'm still unclear as to whether 2 is an okay minimum. It leaves open the question of how easy or difficult it would be if 2 are the only folks who are selected to work together, if you will, not necessarily in the interest of the state. So I'm a little nervous that the minimum number leaves very few operators. And I can't process the advantage of that from the questions I did ask Mr. Tiedemann.
In that case, Chris, do you want to, thank you, Tucker, very much. Chris, do you want to come talk about banks with us?
Not really, but happy to.
Will you please come sit down? Thank you.
For the record, Chris Delia, President, Vermont Bankers Association. Tucker's still with us, correct? Do you mind if I ask him a clarifying question? Tucker, in the language that you included in there uses the term holder of the account. Is that based on a Vermont definition? Okay.
No.
Because I sent a quick email to Aaron Ferenc at DFR because in my mind, we're the holder of the account. The customer is the owner of the account. So that's a distinction that if I heard correctly, you're looking to give that second joint owner the ability to flip the off switch. So I think it's owner, not holder.
Thank you.
And I'll try and verify that before it gets out of your committee. An account number and a routing number will not distinguish whether it's a joint account or not. All of that information resides behind the scenes on the database when the customers come in to set up the account. There are disclosures that are made to the customers as to their rights with the account. I have a joint account with my wife. I could go in there today and I could take all of the funds out and use it for whatever purpose I choose. I will have to get a good divorce lawyer after that, but that's my right as a joint account holder. So in hearing your comments last week, to be quite candid with you, this is a relationship between the customer and the betting entity. We don't want to be involved. We don't want to have any responsibility of providing any information to a third party. I would tell you that would be absolutely inappropriate to give a private sector entity access to banking records so that they can run a betting platform. Absolutely not. We do provide information to state agencies, to our regulators. That's based on disclosures to our customers about Vermont and federal privacy regulations and exemptions in statute for privacy regulations. So I think your approach, and I should say, it's a great question to ask when you've got joint accounts. You do want to figure out how to protect that other person, if you will. But what I think you've outlined here is giving that joint account holder the ability to turn it off. I think that's the right approach to go with. And I'll clarify holder owner.
When you just mentioned that you have the ability to provide account information to state agencies, are you restricted which agencies at this time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and we don't want any more, to be honest with you.
Well, I was just thinking, I wouldn't be super excited from your chair to be like, oh, I'm just going to give information over to Liquor and Lottery.
No. So Vermont we have federal privacy regulations that we have to adhere to. Vermont has an extra layer above that. We're what's called an opt-in state. So I can't do a thing with your data unless you allow me to do that. There's a few exceptions under that privacy rule and in Vermont statute that deal with the sharing of information, for example, with our Department of Financial Regulation. But to also digress ever so briefly, down the hall in the child care bill is a provision that would require us to share information with Adult Protective Services. I've got another bill that Tucker's been working on over in the Senate that would require us during an audit of a state contract to share information with the state auditor. All of those require a look at Vermont's privacy statutes and whether new exemptions need to be made. But those are with state entities or federal entities, not private sector entities.
Carol, did you have anything?
No,
Okay, great.
I needed to hear all that.
Oh, yeah.
Just learn something new every day, Chris. Thank you.
Happy to. And ever so briefly, 30 seconds, the industry is in great shape in Vermont. Okay,
No Silicon Valley.
just to leave it at that.
Yes, that's nice. Okay.
since we're here, would either of the other folks sitting on the bench be interested? Charles, do you have any interest in just offering?
I don't have anything really to
Okay.
add at this
Okay.
point.
Cool.
I could just sit and chat with you all and it'd be nice enough.
Okay,
I just saw the language.
Okay. okay. I think then we are going to take a break until 10:15, when we will be back here talking about the beverage container